Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're tossing out the usual corporate agendas, the endless optimization strategies, the typical leadership talk, all of it. Instead, we're diving headfirst into a deeply personal, actually pretty raw story of transformation. We're going to unpack the insights from this remarkable book called Lead with Prayer. But look, this isn't just some dry collection of research. It's a journey born straight out of author Ryan Skoog's own intense spiritual growth. It's a really profound look at how a leader's private habits completely dictate their public impact. So when Ryan Skoog started his journey to really understand this dynamic, he was struck by this crazy pivotal moment at a national prayer breakfast. Picture this, it's a breakout session packed wall-to-wall with highly accomplished business leaders. A French-Canadian businessman, a guy who oversees thousands of employees, stands up to pray. Naturally, you'd expect a long, eloquent speech, right? Well, instead, he just closes his eyes and utters a single word: Jesus.
And the craziest thing happened. The reality of that one word, in that specific moment, was so overwhelming that people in the room literally started crying. I mean, he didn't need to say another word to fill the space with this undeniable spiritual presence. Ryan realized that, sure, this was a fast prayer in the moment, but its staggering power, that didn't just come out of nowhere. It came from a massive, unseen well of extended, private, slow praying that this leader had been building up for years. And honestly, it was that exact realization that forced Ryan to look in the mirror and confront his own lack of that deep, unseen well.
So, to figure out how to actually build that well, Ryan and his co-authors went all in. They invested 3 solid years into this research, doing over 100 hours of interviews with global leaders. They wanted the whole shebang, the how, when, where, and why of their absolute most private prayer habits. But for Ryan, this wasn't just about collecting data. It was a deeply personal quest to find the real, unvarnished truth behind spiritual leadership.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. Confessions of Empty Leaders. As Ryan was gathering all this data, he really had to confront his own emptiness. Because, let's be real, none of us start out as spiritual giants. And true growth usually kicks off when we admit our own hollow spots. During his research, he actually interviewed an oil company's CFO. This guy, a self-described left-brained accountant, just bluntly confessed that he and his leadership team were basically functional deists. Meaning, yeah, they believed God existed, for sure, but they acted as if he did absolutely zero in response to their prayers. Ryan realized this hit the nail on the head for his own life at times. He was believing, but acting like God wasn't actively involved. So his own journey, much like that CFO's, had to start with admitting exactly where his faith had gone completely cold.
Section 2. Praying through the crucible.
What Ryan uncovered is that for a lot of these leaders, prayer isn't just some neat management tool or a box to check on a daily to-do list. Not at all. Often, the absolute most profound spiritual growth happens when prayer becomes a desperate lifeline during those severe breaking point crises. He deeply connected with this quote from St. Oscar Romero: "There are many things that can only be seen through eyes that have cried." Through his own harrowing experiences, Ryan realized that a leader's pride and self-reliance usually have to be totally shattered before their spirit can be truly rebuilt.
And for Ryan, that shattering happened in 2020. His international travel technology business was just utterly devastated by COVID. His family lost their entire life savings. But man, the worst part? His young daughter was plagued by these graphic, traumatic nightmares every single night, visions of evil spirits tied to the trafficking rescue work their nonprofit was doing in Nepal. She was waking up, vomiting, just pleading, "Daddy, make him stop." Ryan wrote that 2020 was the year he got used to the smell of his carpet. Night after night, literally lying on his face, stripped of all his strategies, all his resources, just crying out to God to save his family. That is the crucible. That is exactly where real, transformative spiritual growth is forged. On the floor, in total surrender.
Section 3. Habits for Spiritual Growth.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is coming out of that rock-bottom crucible, Ryan had to completely rebuild his own spiritual foundation. And he didn't do it with these grand performative public gestures. Actually, he did it through incredibly simple, grounding, daily habits. He learned to seamlessly weave prayer into the mundane parts of his day just to constantly practice the presence of God. He started using triggers, sitting down for a meal, a sudden shift in mood, walking into a meeting, or even just setting a reminder on his phone. It's these small, consistent moments that continuously fill up that deep spiritual well. It's this ongoing, quiet conversation that actually fuels a leader's public impact.
And Ryan found out that this ongoing conversation doesn't have to be complicated at all.
Think about Ernest Hemingway's famous six-word short story, right? A total masterclass in brevity. Well, Ryan found what is arguably the ultimate five-word prayer. Lord, what do you want? Out of all the prayers he studied and started practicing, this one perfectly illustrates how immense spiritual power and personal growth can literally be found in a single, perfectly surrendered sentence. You absolutely don't need a theology degree to pray. You just need a willing heart.
Section 4. Multiplying what you possess.
This realization brought Ryan to a massive pivot in how he understood leadership. Because, think about it, what happens when leaders try to scale these spiritual practices outwardly across a whole organization, but they haven't done the necessary internal work first? Like what happens when we skip the personal growth and jump straight to the corporate strategy? His shifting worldview on this was perfectly framed by the prophet Jeremiah. The shepherds are senseless and do not inquire of the Lord, so they do not prosper and all their flock is scattered. It is so common for leaders to try and guide their flock using just human strategy, big budgets, and clever marketing, without ever genuinely inquiring of the Lord in private.
Ryan actually studied a real-world case study of this exact dynamic playing out. He looked at a grant-making foundation that wanted to unleash prayer across America to transform the nation. Sounds like a noble, beautiful initiative, right? The board was absolutely thrilled. They approved a massive $1 million budget, they gathered up all these major CEOs, built out elaborate strategies, produced these high-quality vision-casting videos. It was a literal masterclass in corporate execution.
But despite all that money, all the compelling activity, the endless strategic meetings, and the flashy vision casting, the whole effort completely collapsed. After months of hard work, the initiative just stalled out entirely. They wanted to kindle a roaring national fire, but they barely managed to light a spark. It was a complete failure of applying a corporate approach to spiritual matters.
So the executive director of this foundation goes to God, bracing himself to give his board the bad news, and he asks why this bold plan failed. And he received this devastating response in his spirit: "You're multiplying by zero." When Ryan heard this, he realized this director's failure was exactly what he was trying to avoid in his own life. The executive's efforts to replicate prayer nationally were doomed from the starting line because he himself was not yet a person of prayer. He had the massive budget, he had the slick strategy, but his own spiritual well was completely empty.
This became Ryan's ultimate lesson, and honestly, it's the core takeaway of our whole explainer today. You cannot replicate what you do not possess. You absolutely cannot manufacture spiritual power on a whiteboard in a boardroom. You can't buy it with $1 million budget. If you haven't been on the floor crying out in your own crucible, if you haven't cultivated those simple, daily habits of quietly asking God for direction, then any attempt to lead others spiritually is literally just multiplying by zero. True leadership has to begin with your own private spiritual journey. As Ryan's journey proves, true transformation always happens from the inside out. So, take a second right now to honestly reflect on your own life. Are you operating like a functional deist? Are you relying entirely on your own strategies while completely neglecting your private spiritual growth? Before you try to go out and change the world, or honestly, even just lead your team or your family tomorrow, maybe the single most powerful thing you can do is just pause, step away from the strategy, and simply ask, Lord, what do you want? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep seeking.